I'm Councillor Paul Gittings. I'm Chair of the Strategic Environment Planning and Transport Committee. Obviously, this is the first meeting of this committee that's held in public following the expiry of the Coronavirus Act regulations, which permitted online meetings. And I'm going to say from the chair that I personally think that's completely, really unacceptable that we are being forced to meet councillors in this way, particularly as Parliament is meeting using online facilities. And later on, Councillor Devine will indeed join us virtually. He'll be allowed to participate in the meeting, but he would not be able to vote, which I think is also a very, very retrograde step in terms of democracy. And we're holding this meeting on a day when I think there was 26,000 COVID cases reported, and the entire COVID cases in this country actually exceed those of the entirety of the EU. And we're meeting obviously during a time when we are still under restrictions. I think that the government's failure to reintroduce the coronavirus legislation was a very, very big mistake. And I say particularly in view of the fact in Parliament they are meeting in different circumstances. So it does appeal one rule for them and one rule for us. Councillor Maskell.
Yeah, this is unusual, Chair, but I wasn't aware you were going to say that, but I'd just like to say that I thoroughly endorse all that you've just said. So thank you for saying that.
Thank you, Councillor Maskell. I mean, look, I'm very pleased to see everybody, and it's nice to see people in person. And obviously, we discovered we met at the town hall. It is nice to do that, but a meeting like this, which is a business meeting where we have to make decisions, we are forced now to meet in the chamber, and that does carry risks. I mean, we've all done lateral flow tests, and thanks very much to committee services for setting up the room in this way. There's a lot of extra work involved. I mean, as it happens, I could have attended a fire authority meeting tonight. There's a meetings clash, and they're having to hire the Crown Plaza in Winnersh for that meeting because there's so many of them that they can't meet in the normal way up at Theale. So it does have a cost to local authorities. And I very much hope this situation will change, particularly if we have to go into any form of other further restrictions. Now, look, that's enough from me about that, but I did want to put on record what I thought about it as chair. So we will be using new equipment connecting the chamber into Microsoft Teams, and there's a live stream available through Teams, and a recording of the meeting will be recorded and uploaded to the website afterwards. So I am going to ask the councillors now on the committee to introduce themselves, starting with Councillor Ayoub. Councillor Carnell.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Paul Carnell from Thames Ward.
Councillor Challenger.
Councillor Challenger, Labour, Catesgrove Ward, and Vice Chair of this committee.
Councillor Devine.
Yes, Ricky Devine, Tyler's Lib Dem councillor, and I'm joining remotely.
Well, we can see, and actually, that's to be fair, that's shows that we can the power of the technology, that he is very loud and clear, and we can get a good sight of him. But
we're trying to hide the smirk.
Councillor Eden.
Thank you, Chair. Rachel Eden, Whitley councillor, Labour.
Councillor Khan. Councillor Maskell.
Labour Battle Ward councillor.
Councillor McElroy.
Green Party Redlands.
And welcome, Councillor McElroy, to your first meeting of this committee. I know you've just been elected. Councillor McEwen.
Thank you, Chair. Rose McEwen, councillor for Churchward.
Councillor McGonigal.
Councillor McGonigal, Park Ward.
Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Chairman. Clarence Mitchell, Conservative councillor for Peppard.
And again, welcome, Councillor Mitchell. I know this is your first time in the chamber attending this meeting, at least.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Page.
Councillor Tony Page, Abbey Ward, Deputy Leader of the Council and Lead Member for Environment Planning and Transport.
And Councillor Rose Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Rose Williams, Catesgrove Ward.
Okay. And so Councillor Stanford Bill has sent apologies for this meeting. Okay. We can now move on to the main business of the meeting. And item number 1 on the agenda, are there any declarations of interest? Not anybody indicating. Okay, and next we have the minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of March 2021 and 26th of May 2021. I hope everybody's read those, and I believe they are a correct record. If anybody's got any amendments, speak now, otherwise I will sign them as a correct record of those meetings. Okay, item 4, we have the minutes of other bodies. The Joint Waste Disposal Board minutes aren't unfortunately next available from the 17th of June. They'll be available for the next meeting. The AWE Local Liaison Committee and the Reading Climate Change Partnership, which we'll be discussing later in the agenda as well. Item 5 is petitions. As I understand it, there are no petitions. And we move on to item 6, which is questions from councillors. And there is a question from Councillor McElroy. So ask him to ask his question.
Great, thanks, Chair. So my question is, from December, local authorities will be able to enforce moving traffic offences such as banned turns, box junctions and driving in formal cycle lanes. We will be expected to use these powers to improve connectivity, boost active travel and increase air quality by reducing congestion. How does the council intend to use these new powers? Thank you.
I invite Councillor Page, the member, to reply.
Thank you, Chair, and I thank Councillor McElroy for his question. We have been enforcing moving traffic offences in bus lanes in Reading since 2006, and the latest announcement from government to extend these powers to other contraventions is welcome and long overdue. Ever since the Traffic Management Act 2004 became law, I've been involved in lobbying successive governments to permit these powers to be made available to highway authorities outside of London, such as Reading. Following increased representations from the Local Government Association, as well as many individual authorities, including Reading, I'm grateful that Grant Shapps, the Secretary of State for Transport, has finally agreed that these important enforcement powers should be made available to English local highway authorities. However, the latest announcement by government is still quite vague. I would caution that whilst there has been a general statement from a junior Transport Minister, Baroness Veer, about starting these powers in December, considerable preparatory work still needs to be completed by the department. Based on the government's record of promising these additional powers, it could be well into the middle of next year before we actually have all the necessary legal approvals, including confirmation of the relevant statutory instruments. The aim of enforcing against moving traffic offences is to stop dangerous manoeuvres, improve road safety and reduce traffic congestion. We are already using our 15 years of experience to identify the worst problems that annoy and frustrate our law-abiding residents, bus passengers, cyclists and pedestrians alike. There are a number of junctions on the main routes in and around the borough that get blocked by selfish drivers undertaking illegal turns or other actions that cause avoidable delays. In addition, officers are assessing all of the current yellow box junctions and will be bringing a report to Traffic Management Subcommittee in September. Officers will also be looking at accident data, the most complained about abuses of no entry, one-way street and banned turns, so as to develop priorities for other locations for enforcement action. Many of these restrictions exist to create safer streets, which in turn should encourage people to make healthier and more sustainable travel choices by walking and cycling more. Officers are also looking at how these powers will support our school streets trials. School streets currently require a physical closure, which is staffed by local volunteers to allow legitimate access. We need to be sure that any school street is a permanent feature rather than an experiment before we commit to the considerable expense of CCTV enforcement. As part of the process of evaluating school streets and the longer term signing requirements, officers will look to use the CCTV vehicle for some monitoring as part of the experimental traffic regulation order period. This will also form part of the review into the new powers. Chair, these enforcement powers are long overdue and are essential to improve road safety and the greater use of walking, cycling and public transport. And I look forward to the further work of officers and to considering their recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Page. Have you a supplementary, Councillor McElroy?
Yeah, I'd like to ask a supplementary. Thank you. Thank you for your response. I don't disagree with it. Thank you. Obviously, the current holders of these powers aren't, doing a lot of this work because they're lazy. Are we optimistic that we'll be better placed to resource this in a way that improves on the status quo?
I wouldn't accuse our local police of being lazy, Councillor McElroy. I think that's an unfortunate choice of words. However, we are on record, and this committee and the Traffic Management Subcommittee are on record in saying that the enforcement of these traffic offences can be better done by the local highway authority rather than the police, who give it a very, very low priority. And that also applies to speeding. And we are also on record in saying that enforcing speed limits should be the responsibility of the local highway authority. We are not getting much traction from the police, from the newly elected Police and Crime Commissioner, who seems to be resisting these requests. That is regrettable, but nonetheless, Reading will continue to press for speeding to be added to our list of enforcement powers, and we will certainly be looking to work closely with the police in identifying the priorities for early enforcement action, as my reply has indicated. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Page. Okay, we move on to item 7, decision book references. I've not received any requests. Then move on now to item 8, which is the active travel programme and school streets update. I understand, Chris Maddox, you're going to present this report.
Thank you, Chair. So this report provides the committee with an update on our active travel and school streets programme, and it's split into 3 main sections. Firstly, we set out the results of the initial consultation on possible schemes for the Active Travel Fund Tranche 2, with a detailed summary of responses provided at Appendix B of the report. We would like to thank everyone who responded to the consultation. We received some really, really useful feedback, and we're really pleased with the good level of support expressed for all of the 4 schemes as part of the consultation. Overall, only just, but the proposed segregated cycle lanes and pedestrian enhancements on Shinfield Road received the highest level of support. Therefore, we are seeking scheme and spend approval from the committee to progress this scheme in line with the programme as set out in paragraph 5.12 of the report. The second part of the report relates to a new funding from the Department for Transport, which is called the Active Travel Capability Fund. It's revenue funding, and we've put in a proposal to the department for a package of measures which are set out at paragraph 5.25 of the report, including a new secure cycle parking hub in the town centre, which we hope would become much more than just a cycle parking hub, but would be a hub of activity within the town centre. At this stage, we haven't received confirmation of funding from the department. There's been a slight delay with that. So therefore, we're seeking scheme and spend approval for this package of measures, but that is subject to us successfully being awarded that funding by the department. And then the third and final part of the report provides an update on our school streets initiatives within Reading. Really pleased to say that we've recently introduced new schemes at Wilson Primary and Thameside Primary Schools, and so far the feedback's been really good from both of those schemes. There's also been a consultation undertaken on a potential school street for Crescent Road. So the 3 schools have worked together to undertake that initial consultation. Again, a more detailed summary of the responses is provided at Appendix D of the report. We'd like to thank everyone who responded to the consultation. Again, received some really good feedback. We do understand some of the concerns expressed by local residents. Clearly, this would be a change to what's happening at the moment. However, overall, again, really pleased to say that the proposed scheme did receive a good level of support. Therefore, we're seeking approval from this committee to introduce an experimental school street scheme on Crescent Road to be run by the 3 schools. And if this is approved, then it will be kept under regular review. Clearly, any tweaks and improvements we can make, we would like to do so, and it will be for a trial period initially. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mullox. I'm going to propose actually that we have questions and debate separated in 2 for this item, because there's 2 very distinct parts of it. From 2.1 to 2.3, obviously the Active Travel Fund and the Active Travel Capability Fund. I'm going to deal with that first, and if there are any remarks, I think Councillor Page had indicated on that. Any other questions, then after that to deal with the issues around school streets, just so it's separated out, because they are 2 quite separate entities really, and then take all the recommendations all at the end. So Councillor Page, you indicated you're going to talk to.
Yes, Chair, I think that's a sensible separate, I think it's a sensible arrangement that you're proposing. Therefore, focusing on the Active Travel Fund and the Capability Fund sections. Can I firstly put on record my thanks to Chris Maddox and his colleagues for the enormous amount of work that has gone in to preparing the report, and also all the work done around making arrangements for a very extensive consultation. And the government challenged us to set out the sort of approach we would adopt. And because we're Reading and we are well used to doing good consultations based on informal and then formal approaches, we were able to rise to this challenge. And certainly the notification that went out to every household near the proposed schemes assisted in generating a quite reasonable response, nearly 1,000 responses, and the clear margin of support for the Shinfield Road scheme is quite noticeable. Not only is that the highest percentage level of support, it's by far and away the lowest level of opposition. So the clear majority in favour of that scheme, I think, means that we should proceed with that scheme. It is one that requires further work. It requires further consultation, and that is part of the next phase. We've had a high level consultation, and I fully recognise that comments that have been made from the Reading Cycle Campaign to the university to individual residents along the Christchurch Road mean that there is still some more detailed work to be done around some of the junctions. But the principle that underpins this, and indeed the other schemes that we consulted on, is that there will be clearly segregated cycle lanes, segregated at standards required by the government, because the government is saying funding will only come to segregated cycle lanes that are of the minimum width of which these are, and various other standards required that have been set out by the government, and I welcome that. And certainly the cycle campaign has raised with us concerns about specific junctions, which we will ensure are taken on board in the detailed design work and the further consultation. In terms of the other schemes, Chair. That's the Bath Road, the London Road and the Southampton Street scheme. These are still schemes that commanded substantial support. Obviously, the Southampton Street less of a margin of support, but certainly the Bath Road Castle Hill scheme is one that I would commend for us to seriously consider should further funding become available. And as paragraph 5.13 makes quite clear, we will be looking to secure additional funding from the DFT, and we'll explore obviously every opportunity that is offered to us. I think proceeding with the Shinfield Road scheme will enable us to set out our stall and show the sort of scheme that can make a real difference. This is a scheme that links with work that we've done at Christchurch Green and in the Redlands area. It helps the university. It goes a full length of the Shinfield Road within the borough, and can really be a flagship in terms of showing motorists, particularly, that there is a safe option to travelling in by car. So I strongly support that recommendation, Chair. On the capability fund, the package of measures that we would like to see delivered are listed on page 55 under paragraph 5.15. Chris Maddox rightly referred to the cycle hub, which is in brackets here, but would very much be the centerpiece of what I would hope would be a range of measures that can enable us to address the concerns that many cyclists have expressed over the years about security in the town centre. And it's all very well, they say, encouraging us to come in by cycling, but is there somewhere really secure for us to park our bike? Because bicycle thefts in Reading have been on an industrial scale at times, and bicycle thefts are still high in Reading. And even cyclists with very substantial chains around their bikes have found them stolen, because the bolt cropping and the sheer gall and nerve of some of the thieves is such that they will wander around and just look and target bikes that have been securely padlocked to those traditional Sheffield racks. So the option of having a cycle hub where you would go in, which would be staffed, where there would be advice about cycling. So not only would you be able to leave the bike there, you would be able to get advice like we used to have at Jackson's Corner when the bicycle kitchen was being operated by the Cycle Campaign and other voluntary organisations. There would be advice. There would be hopefully a coffee shop, some sort of other facilities as well. And this would be a really important development in being able to further incentivise safe cycling into and out of Reading. The other measures are more self-explanatory, but I really wanted to emphasise that the cycle hub is a very important part of that capability fund bid. It's got strong support from the cycling community and the campaign. We would be looking for a network of volunteers to staff that facility. We're bidding for the funds, we'll fit it out. We can't run it with council staff. We will be hugely dependent on volunteers, but I've no doubt that there will be ample numbers volunteering for it. So I would commend those parts of this report, Chair, to the committee.
Thank you. Anybody else indicating? And just on the Shinfield Road scheme, the university wrote a very strong letter of support for that scheme as well. And from the chair, I completely endorse what you say about cycling security measures and the need for a cycle hub. I think that'll be an excellent development for the town, along with those other measures that are listed. So Anybody else want to say anything on those? Looks around. So we move on to the second bit. And sorry, Councillor Page, I know you probably may want to talk a little bit about the school street scheme in.
Yeah, could I just introduce this item again? Thank the officers for the work, but I need also to thank the three schools, or the two schools in the college, or how they're described officially, but the three have collaborated in bringing forward a proposal. School Streets is very much a bottom-up local community, local school-led initiative. This is not something the council is imposing. It is something the council is looking to facilitate and encourage. And I would like to thank the education department. It's not called education department, whatever we.
Brighter Future.
Brighter Futures, sorry. I'd like to thank Brighter Futures and their staff for the work that has been done in promoting this to schools, to the governors, managers and head teachers. And it's very much looking towards the schools to come forward with their own proposals and to also involve not only pupils, parents, governors and teachers, but also the wider community. And that consultation has taken place and is set out in this report. It's probably the most bold proposal that we've had. We've improved and approved a number of other school streets, but this is the most radical one that involves a busy road. I would emphasise the closure period is 45 minutes in the morning and 45 minutes in the afternoon. This is a temporary closure for an experimental period. And the way in which it's been promoted by some opponents is really quite irresponsible, as though we were closing Crescent Road permanently. Yeah. I know there are one or two residents, by the way, on Crescent Road who would like to do that. But that is not what this involves. And the schools have consulted with a wide catchment area. And again, that's listed here. And there is still quite sufficient majority support, in my opinion, to be able to progress a trial experimental school street closure on Crescent Road. There have been some concerns expressed. These will be monitored during the trial period, and I note that we've all had a letter of objection from a local resident who's somebody who engages regularly with the council. So I don't dismiss his concerns, but I would say to him, Brian, let us have this experiment, let us monitor it, and clearly we've heard your concerns, but we are also keen to take forward an initiative that can bring wider environmental benefits to the area, and is one of a range of initiatives that we are looking to promote to reduce congestion and to promote active travel and also improve air quality in the borough. So, Chair, I would commend the work that the schools have done and support the recommendation this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Page. Councillor McGonigal, you indicated.
Thank you, Chair. We are very pleased to see in this report plans for a trial school on Crescent Road. We want to see the impact on road safety, air quality, children's lives and residents' peace of mind. One crucial aspect will be that the problems are not simply shunted elsewhere. It's good that transport officers don't think so, but residents are still concerned. Officers are recommending monitoring the impact during the trial period, and it would be helpful to know what form that monitoring will take. Will that involve human observation, or simply to wait for feedback from schools, local residents and drivers who regularly use that route? Thank you.
So I think that's a question probably for Mr. Maddox. How's it going to be monitored?
Yes, thank you very much. We will be going out on site. It won't simply be feedback. So we've been out on site already. We've looked at the surrounding roads. We've undertaken a parking survey to understand, how many spaces there are at the moment, how many cars are parked on the roads. So we've got a really good baseline amount of data. Clearly, you know, if the school street's approved and it goes ahead, then we can then compare that data with going back out again and seeing if there's more cars in the surrounding roads, if there's capacity for parking in those roads or not, and other things that we can do to try to improve that. Clearly, the other thing we'll be doing is seeing if there's an increase in walking and cycling, because, you know, the main point of the scheme is to encourage parents and students to walk and cycle, taking out cars from going to the schools in the first place. So we're really hopeful that that will, you know, be a success for all of the benefits that that would bring. But we will definitely be going out on site, monitoring the situation, as well as speaking to the schools, the college and residents as well to understand their concerns.
Thank you. Councillor Maskell, you indicated.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to reiterate, it's an important point that Councillor Page makes, and that is that this 6 month, this is a 6 month trial, and it's not permanent, and there will be future consultations on that. But I'd really like to speak in favour of these schemes because it protects the whole school community. It makes things a lot easier when children are leaving school, and you know, it just makes things a lot nicer for people when they know they're not going to be faced with vehicles trying to push their way up to pick up a child or whatever. So I absolutely support these schemes. There's just one question really to Mr. Maddox, and that is essential users. What are essential users? Because I don't believe that parents in their cars are essential users. I hope we don't think they are, because very often the parents are, well, they need protecting from themselves, shall we say that, a lot of the time. And I think these schemes will actually do that. And it will demonstrate to parents that you don't need to drive up to the school gates and fight for your place there. So I just wonder what essential users means.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, so I mean, obviously the main point of the scheme is to reduce cars using the road. Clearly, there are some legitimate uses still, so emergency services, residents, if they've got deliveries or specific things, obviously we'd ask them to try to arrange them to happen not when the school street's working, but on the other hand, you know, if it's essential, then they would be allowed into the zone. There's also an element of discretion that can be used as well. Obviously, you know, the success of the scheme relies on people working together. So what we don't want to do is to upset people when the scheme's in operation. So the marshals on street will be using an element of discretion as well, just to ensure that everything works smoothly. But clearly the scheme wouldn't be a success if a lot of vehicles are let in, because that defeats the object of what we're trying to achieve.
Thanks. I mean, Councillor Maskell and myself, I'm going to say we're jointly experiencing the new school streets at, in Wilson Road, and I have to say that it has made a massive difference to that, to one-way system to that road already, in terms of obviously safety and just general feel to it. It's not cars herring up and down and people trying to force their way into park within about 10 yards of the school. So hopefully other schools, it is a volunteer scheme, and I think the drawback for many schools actually is the volunteer base with this, because it does take time and effort and obviously setting the scheme up. But hopefully schools will take it, you know, so from the examples of these that are setting up. Crescent Road is the most, I was going to say the most radical so far, but I truly believe that will be a success. But let's encourage other schools right across the town to get involved with this where it's appropriate for them. Some roads it just won't work, but for most schools, I think this is a development that will be very, very much in keeping with helping the children walk to school, keep healthier, and obviously sometimes even their parents as well might forsake their cars to walk their children to school. But with that, I'm going to suggest that we...
Chair, Councillor Devine would like to speak to this item as well.
Councillor Devine, sorry, we missed you.
It was me.
That's the drawback to this system, Ricky.
Yes, I'd like to say something about the school street scheme for Park Lane School in Tilehurst. It's already been going now for a month or so, And certainly in the mornings when I've been down there to see it, it's been running rather smoothly, or very smoothly indeed. However, I was talking to one of the residents of Beechwood Avenue, which is a private road that opens onto School Road opposite the school. And he is decidedly unhappy because there are still, in fact, even more cars now than there used to be, pulling up outside his house, parking on a private road, and causing some blockages because the turning around in there is quite tight. The issue, I think, is really that there is no authority to stop those cars going into a private road. They can't simply put a barrier up unless they want to man it 24 hours a day. And the issue really is that people, if they want to park and drop their kids off as close to the school as possible, will find ways of doing it. And clearly in Beechwood Avenue, we have an issue. The original scheme proposed a marshal at the corner there, which they have done. But it's sad to say there are even parents that park in there, laugh at the marshal with the kids in the back of the car, and carry on doing what they're doing without the marshal being able to do anything about it at all, other than take a registration number. And we need to regularise that and take registration numbers and write to these people. But it just points to the fact that people will find a way, where there is a possibility of parking legally or illegally to drop off and pick up kids. So for other schemes, although hopefully they don't have a private road with the issues that creates, but they need to consider very carefully where parents are going to park their cars, because a lot of them are going to find they're going to park their cars anywhere, somewhere, and it could be an issue where they're blocking streets and blocking traffic. And so it's just a pointer, I think, to be well aware of where parents might go and park if the school street is inaugurated in any of your wards.
Yeah. Thanks, Councillor Devine. Sorry, I missed you. Why we have to indicate. I mean, it's the displacement theory, but I know in the case of Wilson, they did suggest to parents, appropriate places to park a little way away from the school where that wouldn't cause inconvenience. Councillor Page, you indicated.
I realise that the Councillor Devine is hanging. I'm grateful to him for his update from Park Lane. Park Lane will also be reviewed in the same way as this scheme will be at the end of an initial period. I would say to Councillor Devine, through you, Chair, that the owners of a private road are able to close it off at whatever time they like. And indeed, some private roads north of the river have put in closures, if not at either end, certainly in the middle. So I don't know how many houses are in there, how many property owners are involved, but the onus will be on them, Chair. I'm not aware that there are any private roads, for example, off Crescent Road or near Crescent Road. That whole area is well restricted in terms of alternative parking, but obviously the purpose of the monitoring and the feedback, as Chris Maddox rightly said, will be taken on board. And if there are parents that are sufficiently selfish and determined to still try and drive as close to the school, well, then that's part of the review that we will have to undertake. But I don't think anything Councillor Devine has said is actually an argument against moving forward with this proposal, Chair.
No. Councillor Eden, you indicate.
Thank you, Chair. I think this discussion reflects, I think, particularly for those of us who are parents of primary school children, an issue that we constantly face, and not specific to school streets, which is that the vast majority of parents and indeed children are very considerate of each other and of the neighbours of the school, but there is always a very small minority of people who, for some reason, think that parking as close as humanly possible to the school is going to enhance their lives, when in fact, always look at them and think, oh goodness, you're putting yourself through a lot of stress, which you could avoid by parking 2 minutes walk away. And I think that small minority of people who are going to be inconsiderate and not consider the well-being of their own children, other parents and other children, and indeed the neighbours of the schools, are probably going to do that regardless of whether or not there is a school street, unfortunately. I do think, though, that a school street, and we've seen it in a number of places now, can have a helpful nudge effect and encourage people to consider their options, whether it is moving towards cycling, walking, scooting. I was passed by, I should say, a very speedy parent on an adult scooter with their child only this afternoon, and then also even those parents who do have to drive, perhaps because they're going on to a workplace afterwards, because we need to remember parents are people and have lives too. They may choose to park a little bit further away and get a little bit of their step count up so they can get their 10,000 steps in. So I think actually, the discussion we're having, the debate we're having around inconsiderate parking is one that perhaps is a wider discussion and not specific to school streets. And I don't think that the council, obviously we can encourage people, but I don't think we can force that tiny minority of people who are inconsiderate to be more considerate, except when of course they are actually breaking traffic regulations.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Councillor Eden, and thanks everybody for their contributions. So we now do move on to the recommended actions from this report, which is 2.1 to 2.44, covering those two areas where we've had a discussion. So I'll ask if everybody's in favour of those recommendations. I don't see anybody indicating against, so thanks very much everybody. We can move on to agenda item 9, which is the National Bus Strategy next steps, and I think again Mr. Maddox is here to introduce that report.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, so this report sets out our proposed next steps following publication of the National Bus Strategy, called Bus Back Better, by central government in March. It sets out a wide range of kind of ambitious plans for public transport, and it also includes requirements for local transport authorities, one of which is to prepare a bus service improvement plan for each area, and that needs to be done, or at least the initial plan needs to be published by the end of October. And then secondly, to establish either enhanced partnership arrangements or franchising arrangements with the local bus operators in the area, and that's by April next year that they need to come into effect. So we're seeking authority from the committee to progress with this work. Clearly we would work closely with all of the operators in the area. Obviously Reading Buses have the majority of services, so we already work very closely with them and we will continue to do so. But all of the other operators as well. One of the advantages of or the objectives of this work is to try to coordinate services better within the local area. So that's one of the things that we'll be looking to do through this work. And also working closely with all the neighbouring local authorities, because clearly we want to ensure that our plans for Reading, both for the borough, but also looking at the wider urban area and further afield, are joined up with the plans that we put forward by our neighbouring authorities. We also note the government's commitment to providing significant funding for public transport. There's £3 billion worth of funding is being talked about. So clearly we will look forward to further details from government on that. And what the bus strategy says is that actually having an ambitious bus service improvement plan would put local authorities in the best place working with operators to bid for some of that funding in due course. The second thing that we are asking the committee to authorise this evening is in terms of the partnership arrangements. As set out in the report, we're advising that we go for the enhanced partnership arrangements rather than a franchising model. We as an authority need to commit to progressing with that publicly. So we're asking that the committee approves publication on the council's website of the notice of intent to prepare an enhanced partnership plan and schemes with local operators and the exact wording is set out at paragraph 4.7 of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks very much. I invite Councillor Page first, and I know Councillor Challenger has also indicated.
Chair, can I thank Chris Maddox for that introduction and for the report. This is an important item since the government brought forward the white paper that is referred to at the top of page 98. And certainly, as paragraph 3.3 says, a core focus of the strategy is that need for greater cooperation between bus operators and local transport authorities. That, of course, is not something that is new to Reading. Reading has always had a very close working relationship with our bus company, primarily because we own it. And the reason that we have been proud to retain ownership of the bus company is that it enables us to display and display our commitment to public transport, but also not only to display it, but also to effectively deliver it. And that has been the basis of a very good relationship ever since the arm's length arrangement was put in place in 1986. So the option of either an enhanced partnership arrangement or a franchising system is a bit of a no-brainer in Reading, and clearly the enhanced partnership route is the obvious route to go down. If we were sitting as a local authority in Greater Manchester, we would probably be saying we are supporting the Mayor's bid to go for franchising, because if you have 30 or 40 different bus operators, many of whom don't talk to each other, then clearly the interests of the public and public transport are better served through a more regulated system. But locally, we have the preeminent Reading buses and a number of independent operators, and they provide an important service, some of them coming in from Oxfordshire through North Reading, and clearly we will be looking to work with them in the preparation of this bus service improvement plan. And clearly we should also welcome and recognise the fact that the government chose to highlight Reading in the document, the Bus Back Better document, and that extract is shown on page 103, and highlighting the fact that we have a young bus fleet in terms of modern buses and one of the most environmentally friendly ones in the UK. Obviously, operating any public transport operation at the present time is extraordinarily difficult. All of the bus companies are on a substantial measure of life support from the Department for Transport, which we are grateful, but that isn't going to continue in perpetuity. We are waiting any day now a further statement from the DFT as to whether the bus support grant will continue in its current level or whether it will be stepped down later in the year, and that will have obvious consequences for the delivery of services. And I'd like to put on record the appreciation, I'm sure, of the whole council for the work that Reading Buses and its staff has done throughout the pandemic. I note that Robert Williams, the Chief Executive of the bus company, is here, and I would ask him to again pass on our thanks to the staff and particularly the drivers who have had a very challenging period. I think, Chair, the other point that I would make is that the future funding of public transport is very much dependent on the bus service improvement plan, and the top of page 99 makes it quite clear that only those bus services operating under either an enhanced partnership or through a franchising scheme will be eligible to receive new funding streams from the government. So there's a powerful incentive for all operators to work together and not to undermine the common good and their own viability. So, Chair, I welcome the report and commend it to the committee.
Thanks, Councillor Page. Councillor Challenger.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a really quick question. Obviously, we've just heard from Chris and Councillor Page previously about the ambitious work that the transport team are undertaking at the moment, plus their day jobs. And obviously, this is an exciting, strategy, even with a terrible name. And I was just wondering through Councillor Page if the timescale is ambitious or if it's something that we're going to be achieved to give it the best that we can do.
Chair, I know we're working closely with the bus company, but perhaps Chris Maddox, as he's doing all the legwork, can expand on that.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think, we're starting from a really strong position, both in terms of the working relationships with Reading Buses we have at the moment, but also with the other operators. And with the neighbouring local authorities. Clearly, we work closely with them anyway, and public transport's a big focus for us. It's one of our key objectives in terms of our local transport plan, along with active travel. So, whilst the timescales are fairly tight, and clearly it's not the only work we'll be doing. I believe that we're starting from a really strong position, and actually we can put together a really strong plan. For October. The other thing is, it's not a plan that we'll do and then stop in October. It will be continually developed and evolved. So once we've got that initial plan published and then we start to look at the enhanced partnership arrangements, we'll be updating the plan as we go. And clearly, depending on which funding opportunities may come forward, then certain aspects of that plan may come forward for others.
Thank you.
Don't see anybody else. Oh, very good, pardon, Councillor Connell, sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. I often receive complaints from the good folk around Thames Ward about the frequency of buses. They say that the bus service gets, the gaps get bigger and bigger. So anything that increases the frequency of buses, certainly north of the river, will be very much appreciated. One other thing, something which could address some of the issues of congestion around Lower Caversham, around Waitrose, that area, might be a park and ride scheme coming into the town centre from north of the river. Are there any plans for that? Thank you, Chairman.
Chris Maddox, do you want to have a stab at that? I'm sure Councillor Page might have something to say as well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, very briefly, again, within our local transport plan, and looking at park and ride services from the north is definitely something that we'd like to do. The main issue we have is in terms of the availability of land within the north. There isn't really any suitable sites within the borough. We do have the Cross Thames Travel Group, where we work with colleagues from Oxfordshire County Council and South Oxfordshire District Council alongside Wokingham. And this is one of the things that we do discuss in those meetings. It's just at this stage, from a Reading Borough Council perspective, our ability to implement such a scheme is limited because we would need the cooperation of the other authorities as well.
Okay, Councillor Page.
Just to add to that, in discussions that I've had with the leader of South Oxfordshire, Sue Cooper, and her cabinet colleagues, and previously with the previously with Ian Hudspeth and Councillor Constance, the rhetoric in support of park and ride schemes is strong from them, but the delivery is nil. And we have challenged them, their local transport plan, their local plans, all say they would like to see park and ride north of Reading. It's their land. We don't own it. We don't control it. But so far, every time they are challenged to come forward with specific sites, there are none. And it's all well and good, both South Oxfordshire and Oxfordshire County Council saying we're opposed to a third crossing, you should promote public transport and park and ride. And we say, OK, give us a site. None have been forthcoming. And so that is, if Councillor Carnell, if through your links through the Conservative associations there, although I know South Oxfordshire is no longer Conservative control, and Oxfordshire County Council is now a Labour Liberal Green coalition, and I'm going across with Councillor Brock in a couple of weeks to have a meeting with the new leadership, and we will be pressing that point on them. It's all well and good opposing things, but we want to see a bit of a positive action from them, and proposing some park and ride sites would be a good start, as you say. There is also the operational difficulty that Robert Williams and Chris Maddox would be able to expand on in more detail. Even if we do get park and ride sites, we still have the challenge of ensuring that those vehicles can keep to a timetable and deliver a frequency of service into Reading that is challenging in those network of streets. It's not easy to put bus lanes down the A4074, for example. There's little point in incentivising people to get on a park and ride bus that then sits in the same traffic jam that they would otherwise be sitting in their car in. The whole point of park and ride is to offer a faster, more reliable journey, and that is something else that we have to resolve as well. But anyway, that's. Do you want to add anything, Chris?
Thanks, Councillor Page. I mean, I suppose you go back to the original points were being made over on the school streets. Obviously, the more people that obviously forsake their cars for public transport or walking and cycling, the better. We'll have less problems with congestion. So it's a kind of chicken and egg situation. But thanks everybody for their comments on this item, and we can move on to the recommendations, which is 2.1 to 2.3, which is basically authorising the officer to prepare a bus improvement plan, establish an enhanced partnership. So everybody in favour of that? I think was all agreed. Great. So we move swiftly on to agenda item 10, the local transport plan next steps. So I think again it's Chris Maddox.
Great, so thank you, Chair. Okay, so this report sets the context for updating our proposed new local transport plan, the Reading Transport Strategy 2036. We initially prepared this document pre the current pandemic. We undertook an initial consultation and had some really positive and strong feedback on the main themes of it. And then we undertook a statutory consultation last summer on the document. Clearly, the recommendations within this report are set in the context of continuing uncertainty regarding travel patterns, how they may emerge in the new normal, as it's being referred to. And at this stage, there is a level of uncertainty regarding that. The other point to make is in terms of some of the discussions that the committee's had this evening around all of the other priorities and opportunities we have as a local authority at the moment in terms of developing detailed sub-strategies to the local transport plan, the bus service improvement plan, the local cycling and walking implementation plan. There's various strategies which actually the government are really keen for us to progress, and they'll provide more details in terms of the sorts of schemes that we'd like to take forward, clearly in the context of the overarching local transport plan. So we're asking the committee to agree to the recommendation to pause further work on the draft local transport plan at this time. This would enable us to focus our resources on these existing priorities. Also in terms of understanding what new travel patterns may look like, collecting some evidence so that we can set a new baseline on which the new local transport plan is then further developed. But clearly the high level objectives of our current local transport plan, which are all around promoting sustainable transport, public transport, walking and cycling, would remain to be our adopted local transport plan at this current stage if this recommendation is agreed this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Page, and I know that on this item, I know Councillor Devine will want to speak, but after Councillor Page first.
Yeah, can I welcome this report, Chair, and particularly draw to colleagues' attention the work programme that is set out on pages 112 to 114, which is a formidable list of schemes, some specific, some borough-wide, that will enable us to then put in place an up-to-date local transport plan that is based on the work that is here, and also taking on board the changing realities post-pandemic. The government has responded by offering us funding for a number of schemes. We've discussed those earlier. They are referenced in this report. There will be future bidding opportunities, and the vast majority of these are intended to deliver safer streets, less congestion, better air quality. And anticipating some comments that Councillor Devine is likely to make in a few seconds, the vast majority of these schemes will deliver improvements in terms of less congestion, more walking and cycling, healthier people, and better air quality. That is something that I would hope that we would all subscribe to, and the demands that government are putting upon us in terms of deadlines, not only applying for but delivering schemes, is such that it would be a complete waste of time to say to Chris Maddox and his colleagues, oh, I want you to finish the local transport plan now, when we have really important work to do that will contribute then as building blocks to a much more relevant and up-to-date local transport plan next year. So, Chair, I commend this report to the committee and would say that the work programme is going to be challenging. It's not only staff here, we're going to have to engage some outside resources, as we already have. I know that the committee will be looking to support officers in the work that they will need to do to deliver some very challenging but important schemes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Page. I don't know if we can, Councillor Devine, is he? It indicated he was going to indicate, but he is there, right? Good.
Chair. Yes, I would like to make a couple of comments on the local transport plan. Essentially, I welcome the document because it sets out various ways we have of easing traffic congestion in the town. But I was really interested to read in paragraph 4.3 that the proposed or potential clean air zone would make little difference to overall air quality. I think that needs qualifying one way or another, because it's not what I would expect to see. It may be that the clean air zone would would improve air quality, but not sufficiently to meet international standards, the WHO standards that we all hope to run by. So I think the issue of clean air zone is not something that we should drop. If it can make an improvement, even if it isn't going to take us up to into the levels of air quality that we would like, it may still make a very significant improvement. As I said, I understand where the officers are coming from, but other authorities have introduced clean air zones. Lots more are actually preparing to introduce them. And it's a bit of a quirk to hear that in Reading, we think that the clean air zone is not going to be effective. also that we are moving towards electric vehicles anyway, and that by 2026-27 the clean air zone will be obsolete. All very well and all well and good, but we have an issue with air quality in the town, and I don't think that we can simply delay matters for another 5 years and essentially ignore the problem. I don't say, well, maybe ignore is a bit of a strong word, but we're not paying enough attention to it. The problems of clean air are not going to go away. There are thousands of cases, and I'm sure there are hundreds in Reading, of our children growing up with asthma and other respiratory diseases. And it's quite clear that it is traffic pollution that is the root cause of this. And I'd remind committee members of the recent case in Lewisham, where a young girl who had a fatal asthma attack and it was the subject of a coroner's report, where the blame, if that's the right word, for the poor air quality lay at the door of the local authority, which was Lewisham. The council itself said they could do little to control emissions, but I think that that is not acceptable, and I don't want to get into a state where we are being accused of ignoring the air quality issues. So I think one of the things I wanted to propose this evening is that we give air quality a recognition that it is a deadly serious problem. It is a problem that we are faced with that we don't really worry about the results of in terms of transport, because it's all to do with people's health, and it's left to other people rather than transport committees of one sort or another to deal with. So I would strongly recommend that we would set up a air quality committee to take charge of air quality improvement. That includes the action plan, the current action plan, which I have to say hasn't made that great a dent in air quality as yet. And despite all the wonderful schemes that we have introduced that do hopefully reduce or improve, air quality, they're clearly not having all the effect that we would like collectively. So I would want to see a committee established with feeding from officers, not just traffic officers, but public health officers, to take charge of the air quality action plan and drive it forward, because I don't think we can afford another 5 or 10 years of the plague of asthma that haunts too many residents of Reading, not just adults, but young children of all ages. And I think we owe it to them to make a priority of tackling the air quality in Reading. So that's my suggestion, is that we actually start with dedicating a committee and some resource, and that may need to come in the budget next year, for tackling air quality issues. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Councillor Wing, for your comments. And as I was indicating in my remarks at the start of the meeting, I mean, unfortunately, because you're joining the meeting virtually, you're not able to actually propose an amendment to this report or any recommendations. You're merely able to comment on the reports, and I think your comments are noted. But as I say, that's in a sense is the inequity of the system, that we've been asked to do that. That councillors, for a very good reason, are at home and are joining this meeting virtually, aren't able to make amendments to reports or move recommendations. But I know other people may want to address your remarks, obviously, but before I move on to other councillor contribution. So I don't know if you wanted to say anything, Councillor Page or Mr. Maddox.
Just briefly, Chair. The opening paragraphs of our draft local transport plan, which sits on our website, make it quite clear that air quality is of top concern to this authority, and it underpins the work that we've just referred to in the that we've referred to in the appendix here. The fact is that we are committed to a whole range of measures that, if implemented, will improve air quality. And the fact is that other authorities have introduced elements of a clean air zone. Councillor Devine, there's only one clean air scheme that affects all vehicles. Most of the other schemes are targeted at either taxis, public transport and lorries, and those local authorities have chosen to exempt private cars, and that's because a number of them believe that the transition to electric vehicles will do the job for them within the timescale that they and the government have set. The issue in Reading is air quality, but there's also congestion. And that's why paragraph 4.4 is also important, because there's no benefit to Reading if every car becomes an electric car but is at the same volume. We just get congestion that might be slightly cleaner, but it's not of any real economic benefit to the town either. And so that paragraph is important, because one of the messages that we will be delivering to our adjoining authorities, particularly north of the river, is that we are still very serious at looking at a flat rate charge that would charge every vehicle that came from Oxfordshire through Reading and that did not stop, and that simply using the town as a rat run between the motorway network, and vehicles that should be on the A34 and the M4 choosing to shortcut. And that is a very live option, and that is still being looked at, and the final sentence rightly says that it will be revisited once traffic flows and behaviours have been baseline. And the other point that I would make, Chair, is that the Air Quality Committee already exists. It's this committee. And we are the committee charged with taking forward initiatives to address air quality. We don't need another committee through you to Councillor Devine. And with respect to Councillor Devine, simply setting up a committee marked Air Quality Committee isn't going to do any more than what we are already doing. We have a very substantial workload on that we are committed to delivering, and we also have a draft air quality action plan that's equally been paused along with the local transport plan, because it goes hand in hand with it. And could I say through you to Councillor Devine, please go and get a detailed briefing from Ross Jarvis and other colleagues who are involved in the detailed work around air quality, and it might enlighten him that we as an authority do have have it as a very high priority, and we also have substantial actions already underway to improve the environment. And the very final point is, don't underestimate the contribution that the railways have made to the problem of pollution around particularly the town centre. And the collapse of the government's electrification programme has done Reading no favours environmentally. Diesel trains will continue to operate into and out of Reading, not at the same high level as before, but they will still be there. And the irony is we're going to see extra diesel trains, hopefully next year, in order to service Green Park. because the government mishandled the electrification programme and no electric trains can run on that leg of the network. And we don't control that unless Councillor Devine has got some novel suggestion. No umpteen committees are not going to be able to resolve that. So, Chair, I understand and reiterate the priority and commitment of this authority to addressing air quality. It sits with this committee. We are the ones that are taking forward the initiatives, and we don't need another one.
Thank you, Councillor Page. Councillor McElroy, you indicated.
Thanks. Yeah, I guess just to say up front, Councillor Devine is right. Having clean air is deadly serious, but our understanding is that the plan does recognise that, and this committee does recognise that as well. So in short, Greens councillors will be supporting the recommendations on this. Thanks for your work, and well done to the officers. In particular, we're really pleased to see focus on taking into account this challenge of the new normal to ensure that doesn't result in more private journeys. I was ranting about that at policy a week or so ago, so really happy to see that. And also really happy to see this focus on rat running, which we agree is one of the real problems here, and not just for the roads, I guess you mentioned in the item, but also for all over Reading, Cemetery Junction, Christchurch Road come to mind. Anyone who's cycled up any of the hills coming out of the river valley during winter knows exactly what we're talking about. I did just want to raise two technical points which are probably uncontroversial. Which are that whatever the plan is that we land on in the future, that it should definitely involve fewer cars, as I think Councillor Page is already alluding to, and definitely not more roads, especially none that are built over green space, because that just kicks the problem into the long grass, and I guess shirks our duty to do something about this now rather than later. And the second point I wanted to make was around the report mentioning the air quality standards, which are in concentrations. And obviously this is a very important yardstick for health reasons and all those sorts of things. And I'm not saying that they are wrong, but I think it's also important for us to bring down these emissions in absolute terms and not just in reference to those concentrations. Obviously you don't clean up spilt milk on the kitchen floor by just spreading it out evenly in the space that you have. So yes, with all that said, Green councillors will be supporting the council taking the time to get this right. Noting that we are running out of time on this, as for all the reasons Councillor Devine mentions, and we don't want it to drag on. It's likely that dramatic change will be needed for us to get to where we need to be on this issue, and there are going to be a lot of naysayers who are going to be interested in keeping the status quo. You know, the sort of person who demands their right to park within 10 metres of the school gate. So I urge the council to approach this challenge with courage, commitment and resolve in seeing it through for the future generations of Reading. We obviously have a mandate from the statutory consultations, and yeah, I encourage us to ditch any nervousness and hand-wringing about that and make those big leaps soon.
Thanks, Councillor McElroy. Councillor Khan, you indicated.
Thank you very much, Chair, because this authority is doing since 2004, and I deliver the leaflet myself to the lorry drivers and things like that in a Cates Grove. Every single person wants to live in a clean air. I was just, Mr. Devine, I'm going to ask him as a friend, is it possible, is there any Hoover we can buy and put in the air, and he sucks all the dirty air and then we can throw it away? How we can control the air? Any scientist tell me, you clean this side of the Reading, if somewhere else, a dusty, wherever they're blowing the bomb, that air comes wherever it goes to, that's beyond human control. We are all talking about this clean air, clean air. Yes, everybody wants it. I would like to know how it is possible we can control the air. Do we know what's happening in the atmosphere? All these satellite up there, what they are doing up there, are they making any effect over that? Can anybody answer that, please? Yeah, I just smoked it outside, but you get 95% tax on those cigarettes, 14.85 pence for a packet of cigarettes.
Should have mentioned.
And what you get all that amount there. I had asthma since 1964. Okay, that's sheer luck because I smoke. Can't pack it up because it's too late for me. But I think we are going behind the nature sometime. We like to live clean. We like to live with things over there. We got best bus fleets with £500 tax, road tax. Every single person on the van who's delivering over there, he pays that. Do you count how much money you are getting from there? Can anybody count on that one? Can anybody think of the, we are worrying about people. Parents don't take their children to the school, need to the school. How many of us, when you go to car park and don't look for the nearest car park space? Be realistic for God's sake and let the people breathe in, work hard, live. They voted in to you, to this authority, to look after their interest. If you are not a councillor and somebody asks you to park your car there, what will you say to him? Do you want me to tell my practical life since 1964 as a driver? Right. You got trouble there. Nice to have a clean air, nice to have beer politics, but for God's sake, be realistic and give people a chance to breathe and live it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. I mean, look, it's challenging, isn't it? To you know, you've got to change habits, and you know, there's an immense number of steps in the local transport plan, as the people have said, where we can address these issues. I mean, I would wish actually that we could have a giant Hoover to hoover up emissions and diesel particles. I think perhaps we could get some of our entrepreneurial people, so friends with government ministers, to design that giant Hoover, naming no names. But no, seriously, I think we move on to the recommendations of the report, which is 2.1 to 2.2, which is essentially saying we're pausing immediate work for the very good reasons that have been outlined in the various discussions. So are we all in agreement with those? Any against? Thank you. Thank you, councillors. Okay. Move on there. We move on to the agenda item 11, the major transport schemes update, which is Chris Maddox. Thanks very much for keeping you busy today, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. It's the last one for me today, I think. So, this report's a standing item to this committee, updating on the progress we're making with delivering our current programme of major transport schemes. As set out in the report, there's good progress being made on all of the schemes. It's a wide-ranging programme from rail schemes to bus schemes and cycling and walking schemes as well. So there's a full update within the report. In terms of the Reading West Station Upgrade Scheme specifically, then we are seeking approval from the committee to enter into a funding agreement with Great Western Railway. The nature of the grant funding from the Local Enterprise Partnership for this scheme is that the grant funding is paid to the council. We're delivering the interchange scheme outside of the station, and Great Western Railway are delivering the new passenger building on the Oxford Road under the railway bridge. So we need to facilitate that transfer of funding to them to deliver that important element of the overall scheme. That may also mean an element of transferring land. So Network Rail will essentially own the station building once it's constructed, and then it will be leased to Great Western Railway to run it as part of the railway system on behalf of Network Rail. So we're seeking authority for those two things, just to enable the scheme to progress. In terms of our elements of the scheme, we're clearly working closely with Great Western and with Network Rail to get everything in place. Initial works on site have started on the interchange elements, and we know Great Western are working hard on the station elements of the scheme. So Appendix A just shows the blueprint for the footprint of the proposed building, which obviously has gone through Planning Applications Committee. So we're asking for those authorities from this committee this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Eden, you indicated.
Thank you, Chair. I very much welcome this report. I got two fairly specific questions. The first one is just really to know what I hope is every councillor's ambition around West Reading Station. As the former chair of Access and Disabilities Working Group, members of that group were very keen that we continue to commit that our long-term ambition is for that station to be fully accessible, obviously with appreciation that at the moment funding has not been made available by either national government nor Network Rail, but I think we should note that because it is really important that all our residents are given the opportunity to use the rail network and indeed sustainable transport. And the other is even more parochial on behalf of Whitley residents. The Green Park Village Station, I think, will bring major benefits, notwithstanding the issues that Councillor Page mentioned around lack of electrification. Many of the newest residents of Whitley in Green Park Village are very keen to shift to fully sustainable transport and to use that station. So 4.10 mentions the issue of as soon as possible. I'd love to know, please, what that means, and particularly also because this will help to reduce congestion, I think, on the A33 from people travelling to, our beautiful Whitley to work and indeed enjoy the leisure opportunities in our really lovely part of town. But seriously, it would be really good to know what the latest expectation is. So we understand, and I think residents have been very patient and appreciative of the delays caused by the pandemic, etc. But if you could update, that would be great.
Yes, thank you for the questions. Yeah, so in terms of Reading West Station, then yes, clearly the master plan that we've agreed with Great Western and Network Rail does include accessibility enhancements to the station. It's not just the current phase of works within the new station building. Then we have identified positions for lifts to take people up to the platforms. There's further works that would need to be done to the platforms themselves to make that station fully accessible, and we're working closely with Network Rail particularly on that. And any funding opportunities that arise in the future, obviously we would be looking to submit a bid alongside Network Rail and Great Western. Hopefully, the works that are being done at the moment will be that first step on that process. We have worked with them since on Tilehurst Station, so things can happen there. In terms of Green Park Station, obviously, we would like to see it as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, there have been delays. I guess the good news is that the construction works did continue throughout the initial lockdown period, obviously at a reduced pace due to social distancing. There's been issues with sourcing materials, unfortunately. We can speculate on the reasons for them, partly the pandemic, but there are other reasons for that as well. It's an industry-wide issue, unfortunately. But in terms of the construction programme, then we're looking to get that scheme complete in terms of the construction by the end of the calendar year. That's more within our control. And then there's a period of both Great Western Railway and Network Rail, then what they call bringing the station into use. So there's certain processes that they need to follow and approvals that they need to seek. From the Office of Rail and Road as well. There's various bodies involved in that, and as we understand it, then there's a certain process. And although we'd hope to run things in parallel as far as we can do, then the railway industry does require certain things to happen at different stages. So what we're doing at the moment is working with colleagues from both of those organisations who've been involved in bringing in new stations into use in other parts of the country to learn from that experience. It's difficult to say for sure. Kind of 3 to 6 months is what we're anticipating once the construction works have been complete. I guess that reference is obviously, we're going to be working with those two organisations to do that as soon as we possibly can, but we do understand that they have particular processes that they need to follow. I think, once we get closer to the finishing line in terms of the construction works, then we can really get a better idea of exactly how long that's going to be. they have put that station within the future timetabling planning. That was done a while ago, pre-pandemic. So they've identified, you know, slots within the timetable. So that is an important step in that process. So in terms of all of those things, that has all been kind of agreed with those two organisations. But this process of bringing the station into use is what is going to take a bit of time, unfortunately.
Thanks very much, Chris. So we have to wait for it to be timetabled, the Green Park stop, and then they can run the trains on them. Let's hope that's a quick process. Anybody else indicating? Don't see anybody. Well, councillors, we're asked to, there's a number of recommended actions from 2.1 to 2.5 covering those areas that Chris has spoken. Are we in agreement with those actions? Okay, thank you very much, councillors. Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Sheen, ready to go?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, it was all silent for a moment. I wasn't sure what was going on.
I didn't have my mic turned on, which is my fault. I was admiring the backdrop to your house.
Sorry about that. Anyway, good evening. Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. I'm Sam Sheen. I'm the Street Care Services Manager, and one of the many hats I wear is for bridge maintenance. So the bridge maintenance report before you is I can let you know that the council is, as highway authority, has a duty to maintain the all our public structures and the public highway according with the Highways Act 1980. The council is responsible for over 260 bridges and structures, and we do this with a program of inspections, all our bridges and structures, and we also produce a 5-year rolling program of maintenance work. The tender for the new bridge maintenance, that's the works element, has been let. And it will cover a period of 4 years with an option to extend for a further 3 years subject to their performance. 4 tenderers came back and following the tender evaluation process, we're going to award it to Volker Laser Limited. They were found to not only meet the quality element, which was weighted at 30%, but the price element as well, which was weighted at 70% of the criteria. I would like to ask the committee to approve the recommendations set out in section 2 of this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Councillors, I've not seen anybody indicating to speak on this. We all agree 2.1, the recommended action. Note the outcome. Thank you very much. We do move now on to agenda item 13, and I've got my microphone switched on, so that does help, which is a much more substantive piece of work to do with the National Flood Risk Management Plan, and I believe that Mr. Sheen is going to introduce that.
Thank you, Chair. Reading Borough Council is the lead local flood authority for Reading, as designated under the Flood and Water Management Act of 2010, and this replaces responsibility on the council, on us, to lead in managing local flood risks from surface water, groundwater, and ordinary, those are smaller water courses, but not main river. It also requires us to meet the requirements of the National Flood and Coastal Erosion Risk Management Strategy as developed and led by the Environment Agency. To fulfil our flood risk management duties, the Council has been working in partnership with the Environment Agency to develop the second cycle flood risk management plan, which covers the periods 2021 to 2027. The first phase was between 2015 and 21, and this plan is now being updated, and we've submitted our contribution towards reducing the flood risks to be incorporated as part of that plan. Separately, the council has secured £150,000 worth of flood and coastal erosion risk management grant in aid allocation from the Environment Agency to deliver a flood reduction scheme in Stone Street, Reading. The Stone Street Reading scheme will alleviate the risk of flooding, reduce the risk of flooding in extreme rainfall events by providing an overflow and surcharge facility in the wide verge area of Portman Road through the use of swales and temporary shallow ponds to store water and improve biodiversity. I would ask that the committee approve the recommendations set out in section 2 of this report. Thank you.
Thank you. Any councillors indicate to speak on this? Councillor Page.
Just a quick one to thank Sam Sheen and his colleagues for the work they do on this. I particularly draw attention to the long list of schemes in paragraph 4.7 that he has been involved in delivering, and I'm now much more of an expert in these things since I've undertaken many site visits to see the works in progress. These are very important to local residents in the area. There's nothing more traumatic, other than a fire obviously, than having a house subjected to serious flooding, and the work that has been done over the years has certainly delivered improvements to those local areas. We look to bid for funds all the time, and this is an example of funding that we have secured that will deliver the scheme in Stone Street. So I would thank Sam and commend the work that he and colleagues do, not only for us locally, but they bring a lot of expertise to wider discussions in Berkshire and the sub-region. So thank you for that, Chair.
Indeed. Absolutely. Okay. Don't see anybody else indicating. So some excellent work here and very good news for residents, particularly in Stone Street and some of those others mentioned in the report. So the recommended actions are 2.1 to 2.2, which is suspend approval, sorry, to 2.3. Are we all in agreement with those actions on agenda item 13? Thank you, councillors. Okay, and so we move on now to agenda item 14, which is the review of the government arrangements for the Reading Climate Change Partnership. We've got Peter Moore, see him on the screen, to introduce this. Far away, Peter.
This report summarises the process that we've been going through to review the governance arrangements for the Reading Climate Change Partnership, which is an independent partnership hosted but not controlled by the council. And the partnership leads on the development of successive iterations of the Reading Climate Change Strategy, most recent of which was the Reading Climate Emergency Strategy for the period 2020 to 25, which was endorsed by the council in November 2020. But this review was an explicit commitment within the new Climate Emergency Strategy to ensure that the partnership remains fit for the purpose of delivering the strategy, and to update and modernise the constitution, which had sort of not really passed the test of time because it dated to a previous era when the governance arrangements were quite different. So we considered various options as part of that review, which is summarised in 4.3 of the report, but concluded ultimately that a refinement of the existing model, which is based on representation on the partnership board of key sectors, but continued to be hosted by RBC, was the best option. The partnership's got an existing constitution, but like I said, this was quite badly out of date and didn't really meet the council's constitutional requirements for the partnerships it hosts. So we went about developing a new partnership agreement based on a good practice template developed initially by Manchester City Council, but which was recommended to be by our internal auditors as an appropriate model for this. So we adapted that for Reading's purposes. The new partnership agreement was approved by the partnership board back in May, and it's now being presented to the council and other partners for their signature. Councillor Page, who represents the council on the partnership board, and I have both been involved throughout this process to ensure that the council's interests are hopefully reflected in the agreement. So the report makes recommendations for the committee to confirm that the council is willing to continue to act as host and accountable body for the partnership, to endorse the partnership agreement and authorise the executive director for economic growth and neighbourhood services to sign it on the council's behalf, and also to confirm the appointment of Councillor Page to the Partnership Board under the new constitution.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Councillor McElroy, you indicated.
Thanks for the work being done here. And I also really appreciate that the work is being done with a real sense of urgency, the urgency that it deserves. I think that the work the partnership can achieve for reducing the emissions and footprint of the borough as a whole is really important. Given the importance of the partnership in this way, my question after a bit of email back and forth to the lead councillor is whether it would be possible for us to ask the partnership board whether it would consider allowing other councillors other than the lead councillor to attend as observers as an exception to the rule. And if not, what measures are in place for other councillors to scrutinise what the lead councillor is voting for in these matters? Thank you.
Councillor Page, you want to talk to that, or but I say Peter Moore. You probably will have considered that in your deliberations. Just wondering what your thoughts are in terms of the framing of that.
I mean, I think that's a question for the partnership board, but we could certainly ask them the question if that's what the committee wishes. I mean, it's important to recognise it is not a council committee. You know, it's not owned by the council. We're performing a role as host, and I think it's really important to ensure that we've got the buy-in from all the stakeholders around that table, that they don't feel that it's a council committee. You know, but we can ask the question about whether how they would feel about having additional members as observers, certainly. Yeah,
thank you much. So, Councillor Page, you want to speak?
Yeah, I was just going to say I'm more than happy to see that question taken back to the partnership board. I would make the point, though, that I think that it should be, if there is consideration to be given, it should be a member of this committee. And if Councillor McElroy is willing to accept that as a qualifier, we cannot have a situation where any one of 46 members just decides to rock up. I think there has to be clearly some legitimate interest. So if he's agreeable to that, I'm more than happy to see the question put to the board. It's not something that I understand where he's coming from, but it is important to emphasise this is not our board. We are one of a partnership that's listed on page 155, and I know a number of them value being able to talk frankly and candidly in a way that a more public meeting might, in other ways, inhibit. Nonetheless, the request has been made, and I do accept that it is not clear from the partnership agreement about the status of the meeting in terms of being entirely closed or open to certain councillors. So I think that request should be taken back in those terms.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Page. I mean, thank you for interjecting. I mean, I suppose I declared interest because I was lead councillor some time ago when the board was originally set up, and it was very much in the spirit of a partnership arrangement. And as Peter Moore said, this is hosted but not controlled by the council. And I think sometimes the ability of board members to have a candid discussion, if you like, not in public over certain issues to do with climate change strategy is a useful one. So also I'd further add that obviously the minutes we've just had the meetings come to this to this committee, so we can scrutinise what decisions are made. And obviously a lot of the climate change work that is done by the council is actually framed by this partnership board. But as I say, I think, you know, in the spirit of what the question was said, it's a viable question to ask. But I think, to be frank, the last thing we really need with this body is for sort of half a dozen, 10, 20 and any number of councillors to want to chip up to this to these meetings. And I think so we can obviously Councillor Page is the nominated member in the voting structure. But thanks very much, Mr. Moore, for your for presenting the report. And thanks very much everybody for their comments. So if we could confirm the actions of the recommended actions 2.1 with 1, 2, 3, 4 actions. Everybody in favour of that? Okay. Thanks very much, councillors. We move on to the, as he hastily looks through his agenda, for agenda item 15, which is obviously climate change related, the low carbon energy capital investment. So again, I think that's Peter's going to introduce that report, Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Chair. So members who were around in February may recall that the budget that was approved at that point included substantial capital allocations to help deliver the council's carbon plan commitments, and particularly our target of an 85% reduction in our corporate carbon emissions by 2025. The programme is now developing apace. The current status is summarised in Appendix 1. So this report is simply seeking approval to spend against the programme as set out in the appendix, which has been developed under the guidance of our Corporate Climate Programme Board. I think I should say many of the projects within the programme are still subject to detailed feasibility and or satisfactory business case development before we can fully commit to them. So some of those projects might drop out of that programme and new ones may need to be brought in to deliver the requisite carbon savings. As such, we don't really want to pickle the approval to spend in the aspect of the appendix. So the recommendation Roman 3 gives delegated authority to the Executive Director to agree changes to the programme without recourse to further approvals, so we don't have to trouble this committee every time we want to buy an LED light bulb or tweak the project programme. So as a final recommendation, you'll notice we anticipate further opportunity to bid for government funding in this area. The funding opportunities relating to climate change tend to come very quickly, tend to have very short deadlines, and tend to require us to move pretty fast. So that means we can't always easily meet the council's current constitutional requirements for bids to be approved by committees prior to submission, where they involve a contribution from the council of more than £500,000. So the report also seeks delegated authority to submit such bids and to commit some within the approved budgets where they would enable us to leverage in additional funding from central government, subject to the usual safeguards around the director having that delegated authority, exercising that delegated authority in consultation with lead member and finance director.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter. Anybody indicating? No. I mean, obviously it's a tremendous programme of work, and I think a part of over £30 million of climate change measures that were endorsed in the budget when it was passed. So thank you, councillors. We can agree the recommended actions, I hope. Agreed.
Oh, I was going to welcome them.
Chair, sorry, Councillor Devine wants you to say a few words.
I'm very sorry, Councillor Devine. It's very difficult to see on this system. So, Councillor Devine, far away.
Just wanted to say how pleased I was to see the number of heat pumps that are included in the various schemes. I think that's very important that we actually lead the way where we can in either air source or water source heat pumps. So that was very pleasing to see, and I welcome it, and indeed the whole report. One thing I did note, though, is that we're planning to do some major works on the Hexagon. And I assume that means that we are satisfied that the Hexagon as a building is going to stay with us for a good few years yet. Because not so long ago we were talking about knocking it down and replacing it. So I don't know where that went to, but yes, I'm happy if we've settled on keeping the Hexagon alive and kicking for the next 10 or 20 years, all well and good. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Levine. I think the Hexagon will be alive and kicking, hopefully for a few more years yet. Very much so, particularly with some of the measures that are being put in place in these reports. Okay, can we return to recommended actions? All agreed? Yes, everybody's in agreement. Well, look, thanks, councillors, for attending the meeting tonight. Obviously, we'll see you at other various committees in the future, but ask everybody obviously to keep safe and well in these challenging times. And with that, I'll close the meeting. Good night.